It's a true story. The guy at the top is Ben Crenshaw. Guy in the lower corner is Sam Snead. They're playing Augusta one day, and they're on the back nine. Before they redid the course, it was a par 4 dog leg to the right. Crenshaw, the younger of the two, is standing over his ball, about ready to tee off. And before he hits his ball, he remembers that he thinks this is the hole that Snead, the legendary Snead, birdied in one of his early Masters tournaments. So he steps away from his ball and asks Snead, hey Snead, is this the hole that you birdied in one of your first Masters tournaments? Snead says, as a matter of fact, Crenshaw, this is the exact hole. Snead said, Crenshaw said, how did you play your shot that day? Did you just bend it on purpose around that tree, or did you just pound it straight over the top? Snead said, as a matter of fact, pin placement that day, Crenshaw was directly behind that tree. He said, I took dead aim at that pin, and with everything I had, I swung my real wood driver, not that graphite stuff that you use. Everything I could, I swung as hard as I could. He said the ball takes off on an ideal trajectory, perfect flight path, up over the top of that tree, lands short of the green, rolls up onto the green. He 2-putts for a 3 on the par 4, birdies the hole. Have you heard this story? Birdies the hole, okay, goes on to win the tournament by 1 stroke. This is a true story. Crenshaw, standing there, sees a similar, if not identical, pin placement, figures to himself, if that old man can do it then, I can do it today. So with everything he has, he swings as hard as he can. Perfect line, ideal trajectory, and you know what happens, right? Hits the top of the tree, falls back down to earth, and frustrated, he turns to Snead and says, hey, I thought you said up over the top, bounced short, rolled up, blah, blah, blah. And Snead delivers the now infamous line, I did, Crenshaw, but that tournament I played in, it's like 20 years ago, and the tree's grown since then. Now, that's a true story, okay? Johnny Miller will tell that story every once in a while if you ever watch the Masters. What I like about that story is, number one, that it's true, but number two, that it sets up our very brief conversation about things that used to be achievable with less knowledge, less skill, and less technology. It used to be achievable, but these days it's more difficult. Communication, relationships, and customer service being 3 of them. Do you agree with that? That it used to be easy, right? If we just satisfied the customer, if we just did what we were supposed to do, they were fine. Are they fine if you just do what they expect anymore? Are they fine?
Yeah.
They want something more. They want us to exceed their expectations. Now, Mr. Schrepfer says, I want to know what's wrong. Okay? Are you just kidding around? Is that just for the hell of it?
We've tried to fix some of the stuff that they don't. We've tried to fix everything they said was busted.
Yep. So here's the deal. Things have changed in the marketplace. Dramatically changed. Like 180 degrees from where they used to be. I've been having some conversations with some of the guys that run this place and sell, and one of the things that's changed in selling is that the more the customer talks, the better they like you. The more that you talk about them, not yourself, the more you talk about them, the more they trust you. Used to be the opposite, right? Used to be you walk in there, you dominate the conversation, you beat your freaking chest about how great you are, and that's how you used to sell. People hate that stuff now, right? They hate that stuff. Same with customer service. You are on the front line. He said you're in the best position as far as customer service. You are. You have intimate, frequent, almost day-to-day contact with the customer. You have the real-time, relevant information. So when they say, we want to know what's wrong, you're the best source to tell them, to find out what's wrong. Now, why wouldn't people typically tell ownership, management, project managers what's wrong? Well, for one, maybe they don't trust each other. Maybe they've told people before and nothing happens, right? Maybe you just don't care. That stuff will kill an organization, and it will kill your career. When somebody says, I want to know what's wrong, we have to have the courage and the skill to be candid, to call and say, here's what's cooking. And you have to do it in real time, right? You can't wait for 3 or 4 things to go wrong, and then something blows up, and then say, oh, by the way, for the last couple weeks, something's been cooking. Does that make sense? Sometimes there's this old adage that, trust needs to be earned. this is a little bit of a provocative statement, but I don't know that we have that time and convenience anymore. Sometimes I think you just have to trust that the right thing's going to happen. Even if it hasn't in the past, you have, I think there's 14 people that I count in the room. Okay, just to break down, one of the things that I do is speak, and the first rule of speaking is know your audience. Well, the audience today, there are 6 of you with almost a decade or more of service to this organization. There are 6 of you with less than a year, and there's 2 of you like with 3 years. So this is kind of a split group, right? 50-50. That could set up some huge challenges, some major conflict if you let it. Or it can be a huge competitive advantage. The new people can help push the old people into a new marketplace. The more experienced people can help the new people learn more quickly. But you have to say, I'm going to trust each other from the start to do that. What's the benefit of that? The quality of your life goes up, and customer satisfaction will go up in the meantime. Any questions so far on this? We're just talking about how things have changed, and one of the things that has changed is that it's not just about customer satisfaction anymore, it's about exceeding their expectations. It's about what I like to call customer delight. Customer satisfaction isn't good enough, and the only way that you can exceed the customer's expectations is to find out what they really want. Okay? Second thing is that we have to give trust, not wait for it as much. And then the third thing that I want to say as it relates when John Schrepfer says, what's wrong? Many times when I work with clients and individuals, they talk around people and they talk around issues. What do I mean by that? If there's something wrong and somebody's talking around it, what's going on?
Being a politician.
Beat around the bush, what?
Being a politician.
And what's that mean?
You don't give an answer, you just go around it.
Yeah. You don't tell the truth.
Yeah.
You be vague and ambiguous. You're not specific about anything. If you got some strong feelings, you just pretend you don't. That's talking around stuff. The other thing that happens is, and this is the hardest stuff, is that if you have a real legitimate beef with somebody, okay, you're pissed. And you tell everybody else but that person. And in some cases, some of the people that you tell instead of the person is the customer, right? I don't know what's going on at the office. I tell them and I tell them. What does that do to the customer's faith in all of you? Right? You might feel good, like somebody else is getting the blame, but you're actually shooting yourself in the foot. You get that, right? So we gotta go direct. We can't talk around people. We can't talk around issues. Did he go? Questions or comments about that? If you have an issue about going direct to somebody, if you don't feel, then you have to go to somebody else and say, look, I'd like you to intervene here and help me work some things out. Okay? Any questions about that stuff? When it comes to relationships, I just want to click through. When it comes to building relationships, and sometimes it's internal relationships, so the relationships that you have with each other, and sometimes it's the external relationships with partners, vendors, generals, certainly customers. When it comes to relationships, too many times we wait to work on the relationship until something goes bad, okay? It becomes in critical condition. And too many times it ends up in critical condition because we don't claim that relationship as critical, meaning important. Does that make sense? We have to know what our most important relationships are. There are certain relationships in this room that are more important than others. And you have to claim that and say, this is an extra special, critically important relationship, and therefore give it that attention. There is a different process, a different mindset, a different approach between building, strengthening, and maintaining relationships. And you have to know what you're doing. Some customers, it's rock solid already. You just have to maintain it. Sometimes there's a little rocky start, sometimes there's conflict, and you have to strengthen or build that. Does that make sense? And when he says, look, we could talk, you and I could talk about some of that stuff. If you're in a situation where something's gone wrong and you need to strengthen it or build it back again, let's talk about it. I'm not big on manuals, okay? I'm big on real life situations. Let's figure it out. Let's not teach you a technique in a classroom. Let's go on site and deal with a real issue, okay? Is there a single solitary process for all of us to build better customer service? Is there a single solitary process that everybody can use? No way. But you need to have yours. You need to have a process that works for you to improve your customer service for internal customers as well as external customers. And that's one thing that I would love to help with, and I think the management ownership would love for you all to have greater skill and confidence in strengthening, building, and maintaining those critically important customer relationships, which you're in the driver's seat at maintaining. When you think about relationships, this is personal life or professional life, when you really think about it for a moment, most of life's greatest joys and pains, personally or professionally, usually boil down to relationship, right? I mean, the greatest moments we have many times are because of other people. Many times the most frustrating, gut-wrenching, mind-bending moments in life because of somebody else. Yet we don't necessarily take all the time and place the emphasis on those relationships. How do you like this one? 9 times out of 10, when there's a relationship that's not where it needs to be, 9 times out of 10 it's your fault. You agree with that? No? Anybody do agree with that?
My wife.
Huh? What?
My wife.
Your wife would agree with that, yes. How could I make a statement like that and be more correct than incorrect?
Because you can't change what they're thinking, you can change the way you're thinking.
Yeah. There's that old serenity prayer. I think it's tied to Alcoholics Anonymous. A lot of times, God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right? Somebody, I wish I could claim this, but I can't. The serenity prayer has been rewritten. God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know it's me. And a lot of times in relationships, if you want to change the relationship, you got to change yourself. A lot of times when we lock in on somebody and we think they're a certain type or they're a certain mindset, we just pile in information and data to reinforce that belief. Does that make sense? So we need to open our mind. We need to change our mind a little bit. We need to change ourselves, because when we change ourselves, they have to deal with somebody different, and then it changes the relationships. Last thing is that there's this old cliche, this adage about, we have a great 50-50 relationship. Well, 50-50 relationships don't work. They don't work in marriage, they don't work in family life, and they sure as hell don't work in business. Because if you do your part, okay, you do your 50% and they fall short, you're screwed. It's got to be 100-100. Does that mean you're going to not fight anymore in relationships? No, you're still going to fight, and this is a ridiculous example, but the fight's going to change, right? Where in a 50-50 relationship, the fight is about, you didn't do your part. Well, you didn't do your part. In a 100-100 relationship, it's like, you know what? Things aren't really good between us right now. It's on me. The other person says, no, Steve, really. It's my fault. Silly example, but when each party takes 100% responsibility for the relationship, you focus on solving things and you stop blaming. Questions or comments about any of these? As it relates to relationships, the universal truth is that we live up to or down to the expectations of those with whom we live and work. Okay? So if you're in a situation where it's just not working out so well, look at the people around and say, okay, they've got something to do with this. All right? We're in relationships for one of two reasons. You're in your profession with these people for one of two reasons. The first one is that it's easy. They don't push you, they don't challenge you, they don't raise your expectations at all, it's just easy. The second and better reason to be in relationships is that the other party, the other person brings the very best out of you. And obviously those are the relationships that are higher quality, they're healthier, and when we're in those relationships, it's kind of that back and forth, day after day, moment after moment of challenging each other to be better, and everybody feels good about that. When it comes to the critical relationships, it's those relationships that typically, those select few, that typically determine the overall quality and productivity of our personal and professional lives. As a side note, I was married for 19 years. I just want to frame this up so you know that this isn't just some outside schmo that I hired to come in and pitch you on relationships and customer service. My wife and I were married for 19 years. In 2009, she got diagnosed with breast cancer. At the time we had 4 kids. Our youngest was just 1 year old. And 15 months later, she was gone. Okay? And we've had this business since 2004, and we built the business based on our ability to help people with relationships, help people communicate, take the emotional component of life and direct that towards something that's mutually beneficial, and we call that energy. And the 4th area is commitment. The day we found out that her days were literally numbered, she said to me, I'm so glad we made the commitment that we were the most critical relationship for each other. And we did. When we were dating, I said to her, look, if we're even gonna think about rings, if we're gonna think about marriage, then I need to know that we're number 1. And I don't mean like, we're number 1. I mean like, you're number 1 in my life and I'm number 1 in your life. I said to her, I'm not gonna let, my friends and golf and business and money and whatever else get ahead of you and me. You're gonna be the most important, and I want the same from you. I don't want your girlfriends to be number 1. If and when we have kids, I don't want the kids to be number 1. I wanna know that this is number 1. And in the lower level of St. John's that day in Maplewood, she said, her days are literally, 8 days later she was gone. She said, I'm glad we were critical relationship. Now, that's an over-dramatized point to make the point that you have to claim these. If you're gonna be, your quality of life will go up, you'll be more efficient and more effective, your customer service will go up. As it relates to customer service, John says, put on your happy face. Well, the only way you can put on a happy face and not have it be fake or manufactured is to be happy, to be content. When Harvard Business School studies customer service and they say, what makes great customer service? A satisfied, content, fulfilled employee that feels like day after day they're empowered to quote unquote make a difference. Okay? That's what drives customer service. When you can execute on making a difference the way that you see the need to have a difference made. Does that make sense? So if you don't feel empowered, okay, if you don't feel like you can do what the customer needs done just as far as customer satisfaction, that's a problem. You better tell somebody. And I would like to throw out setting the bar higher, go for customer delight. If you see an opportunity to exceed their expectation and you can't execute on that, that customer is a very critical relationship. Tell somebody, hey, here's what we need to do. Here's what I'd like to do. And don't demand it, just ask, how can we get this done? Questions about the critical relationship piece of this? As it relates to communication, it's the lifeblood of quality relationships. Customer relationships or internal relationships, the lifeblood. If you have great, frequent, right tone, clear communication, if all that communication stuff is in place, you got a shot at a rock solid relationship. Okay, you got a shot. If the communication sucks, you're in big trouble. Okay, so when it comes to communication, what we're talking about is you better be crystal clear. You better be concise. Brevity, when it comes to communication, is a blessed thing. You better be candid. Candid these days, folks, is 2 parts. Facts and data, and the right tone. If things are not going well, your tone in your face better reflect that you're not happy. We live in the Midwest, and too many times we're Minnesota nice. Right? Which psychologically speaking is called passive-aggressive. Right? We put on a happy face when somebody's in the room, they walk out and stab them in the back. Right? Seriously, that's Minnesota nice. We have to be candid in our communication. Facts and evidence and data, and the right tone. Last piece, we have to communicate dynamically. We're competing against videos on phones, tweeting, Facebook, all that other stuff. It is a challenge when it comes to communication for us to stand out and be heard. Here's the science of communication. Now, this research was done in the 50s, and it's never been more true than today. When we're communicating with meaning and message, okay, as opposed to just data and facts can be done through an email. That's your typical status. That make sense? So a lot of the status meetings with my clients, I tell them just to shut down the status meetings. You can send that through email. But when there's issues with meanings and messages, here's what happens. Out of the entire, the message, only 7% of that message is made up from the words that we use. Texting, emailing, that whole stuff represents only 7% of the intended message. So if that's your primary way of communicating internally, or God forbid with customers, is through email, you're running the risk of being misunderstood, misperceived, and miscommunicating at a 93% level. That's a big problem. If you add the sound of your voice by picking up the phone, it cranks up another 38%. In an email message, these 3 words, I'm not mad, you don't know what it means, right? Because it's black letters on a white background. I'm not mad. Does it mean I'm not mad? Or does it really mean I'm not mad? You don't know on a text or email, right? But if you pick them up on the phone, you can say, I'm not mad. What's 7 plus 38?
45.
Guys are taking their shoes off. Right? It's 40. We're not even to half of the message yet, right? Even by picking up the phone from a fundamental communication standpoint, we're at less than half the message. More than half of what people hear is based on what they see. It's the non-verbal communication. Okay? Now I'll tell you a quick personal story. When I get intense, okay, I get big red blotches, okay? If I'm really pissed off, I get red like a Holstein cow, only it's not black and white, it's red and white, and I get them all over my neck and chest. And apparently I get the same thing when I'm in the mood. So Angie would know if I had red blotches on my neck and chest, she knew I was either pissed off or turned on.
Dave, which is you?
Our bodies give us away, and too many times we don't want to communicate face to face because we're chicken. Yet it is by far the most efficient and effective way to communicate. You guys work on different sites. You're in different places all the time. You have to make a commitment and a priority to meet with the customer, to meet with each other, to meet with the office face to face and talk about the critical core issues. Okay? What questions do you have at this point about this? When it comes to, I call this energy piece, this is just the feelings, attitude, and emotional part of the program, right? And we're not going to kumbaya, there's no group hug coming here, okay? But I do want to talk about the power of emotion. I can tell you as a matter of fact that those 4 areas, the communication, relationships, the energy, and the commitment, is not just the 4 cornerstones of this business. It has been the 4 cornerstones of my family, the 4 kids. When Angie died, my youngest, Ellen, was 2. We had a lot of emotion. Genuine, real, intense, like at times unable to kind of channel the emotion. So this is not, and then I got out of college in the 80s, and in the 80s it was all about the power of positive thinking, and when things went to hell, you were supposed to go to your happy place, and the happy place never worked for me. You know, I'd go to my happy place, come back, and things still sucked. And so if you can take the genuine, real, pure emotion, positive or negative, happy or sad, good or bad, whatever that genuine emotion is, and direct it towards something good, mutually beneficial, that energy or emotion can fuel good things, okay? So that passive-aggressive nature of those of us that have been born and raised and still live in the Midwest, that passive-aggressive nature is a liability. Use that emotion. Don't hide it. Make sure that we're using it to build and not tear apart people and teams. The last piece I want to say on the energy, and then we'll close it up, is that positive people typically attract positive people. No kidding. Negative typically attracts negative. But there's also this other piece that if you are one of these people that typically is positive, you see the good in things, don't be surprised if negativity or negative people or skeptical people or divisive people come directly after you. It's just the nature of the beast, right? Misery loves company. People like to take people down a notch. And so you can't over-respond to the negative stuff that happens. Does that make sense? You can't overreact to that negative stuff. It's going to happen. use it and leverage it to something that is good. I think that's the last piece here. Things have changed 180 degrees from where they used to be. It's about customer delight and non-satisfaction. The more that they talk, the more that you get the other person talking, the better they like you. The more you know about them, the more they trust you. When the owner says, I want to know what's wrong, he's not kidding. It'd be nice probably once in a while to know what's going right, too.
I wasn't raised that way, so I'm okay.
Oh, okay. So if things are great, keep your mouth shut.
You don't have to tell me. My dad never said you did anything right. It was always you did something wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm okay.
Okay.
Which is a fault, because I never call you up and say you did a hell of a nice job.
Yeah. When it comes to customer service, the only way that you're going to have a happy face is if you feel like you're quote-unquote making a difference. And if you don't feel like you can make a difference, you need to communicate and let somebody know. When it comes to problems, this is not just a motivational speaker saying this now. I'm serious. Problems are opportunities to strengthen a relationship. There's a conflict internally. It's an opportunity to make things between you and another department, you and the office, better. Blame, when we get into the blame game, it's typically, I like to call it BS and BO, the stinky twins. We're either blaming ourselves or we're blaming other people, BS and BO. And it's all inherently about what's happened, and we can't change that. You're on the front line. You are what the customer experiences. They expect you to be able to do your job, right? They expect that. But how? Your mindset, your communication, the way that you carry yourself. That's the how, and that's what makes for great customer service. Any questions before I get out of the way? Go home for the day?
I want to wrap it up with a couple things. What I'm going to focus on with you guys is soft skills. That's what Steve does. And you can obviously tell if you've known me for a while, I could never have that presentation. It just would not be me. I would like the field to take care of as many customer issues as you possibly can. I would like you to know that and know that you would call for a project manager when you needed them. Most of you are on projects where we can bill for that issue, rather than a PM I can't bill for. So selfishly, to make money, I want you to know that that's the best place. You may say, well, that's his job, but I want you to understand, you're just moving an expense that went from something we can charge for to something that's a cost. In helping us, you'll make us more lean, right? So you'll make us more competitive. So I'd like you to give some thought to those of you who have day-to-day customers or occasional customers. Try to figure out how to stay in contact with them and keep the relationship going. I'm not opposed to anybody talking to Scott and saying I'd like to grab somebody and take them out for lunch. We'll do that. You can find out a little bit about them. There are some people you can't get them to lunch, and there are some people you don't want to take to lunch, but you'll figure that piece of it out, right? I'm not concerned about your technical skills. I mean, I think you all are pretty good guys technically. What I think is important is that we increase your soft skills and try to make everybody here more successful that way. So that's why I'm going to try to find some online stuff that'll help you guys and offer it to you. Here's my board 6. If you're not familiar with soft skills training, most of you maybe have never had it. And when he sits in front of you, maybe that talk is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable at first to listen to a guy. If you didn't notice, he increased his volume. He's not pissed, he's just trying to get your attention. He's trying to accentuate something. So if you're not familiar with that, it took me a long time to get comfortable with the warm and fuzzy, because the guy who raised me was not warm and fuzzy. So, but I think it's good, it's necessary. I raised 2 daughters, and so you can think about that. I had to have different skills to get by with a couple of daughters. So that was actually pretty helpful to me. I hope that you'll trust me that I'm going to focus on soft skills. I think that they're very, very necessary for us to continue to have a competitive edge against our competitors, okay? The thing you talked about for emotion, and I don't know what it is, but there's a word, and you guys ever do a WebEx and you see the little faces for, there's a word for it.
Emoticons?
And that's the newest word in the dictionary this year is those little emotional deals, so even if you weren't happy, you could say I'm happy. Some of you know I sold insurance when I went from being an electrician to coming inside, and as stupid as this sounds, but I just want you to think about it. If Randy was gonna make a phone call, go see a customer, and this was a mirror, what would Randy do?
Smile.
He'd smile. Dan knows, he would smile. And when you smile, your voice becomes friendly, doesn't it? Give it some thought. Thanks for coming. I appreciate everybody working for us. I hope that we can keep this busy next year or even busier is what I'd like